Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Jenny if you don't know who I am, and I make videos about all kinds of different things to do with physical health, disability and chronic illness, mental health, a bit of Disney and various vlogs and stuff, so hopefully there's something here that you'll enjoy. And today's video I am going to talk a bit about being diagnosed autistic as an adult. So April is Autism Acceptance Month. You might also hear it called Autism Awareness Month. Generally I think the autism community prefer acceptance rather than awareness, like overall, but obviously each person is going to have their own opinions on that. Because of that, it being the month, I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk to you a bit about what it's like to be diagnosed autistic as an adult. So yeah, I am autistic. I think it's very important to acknowledge that this video is just one person's experience of autism, and it doesn't mean that my experience is going to be the same as anybody else's, so just take it as that, I suppose. Yeah, we're all individuals, and it's important to remember that, I think, and to understand that you meet one autistic person and you've met one autistic person. I think the saying goes, it's important not to kind of put your preconceived ideas onto another person. But yeah, I just wanted to use this space to tell my story a bit, and hopefully it might help someone else that may be going through the same or who's been through the same recently. So growing up, there was no mention of me being autistic as far as I'm aware. My parents haven't ever said anything, and I was always quite a shy person, quite an anxious child, and I remember my parents having to come into school quite a lot because I got really anxious about certain things. I didn't like change. I would get like really worked up about seemingly little things that none of my other classmates were really like getting worried about. But I think everyone just thought I was quite an anxious person. And that was kind of that. I remember when I was in, I think it was like year 4, so I don't know how old that was, but yeah, we were going on a school trip and I was just so worried about going on this school trip. In retrospect, maybe I shouldn't have gone, I don't know. No, I'm glad I did go because I did enjoy it. But I just remember like my teachers and my parents having to do a lot of like preparation with me and like telling me what to expect when we went there. I didn't like not knowing what was going to happen. But yeah, like no one ever really kind of thought anything of that. It was just who I was. And I used to get anxious about all sorts of little things in school. My mum was always coming in to have a chat with my teachers, and I would miss days off school because of anxiety and things like that. But yeah, nothing about autism was said. I think at that point it was very, like, I mean, it's not very well understood in women now, but it was even less understood back then. And looking back, obviously now with retrospect, I can see a lot of traits, but I didn't have that knowledge at the time. And then like I went to secondary school and I still struggled quite a lot. I was quite sort of good academically, so I think that kind of covered up a lot of my struggles, which is frustrating because if I'd had support back then I might have found things easier. But at that point, like, I don't even know if I knew anyone that was autistic, or like, well, obviously I probably did, but it wasn't talked about, it wasn't in the open. And yeah, I just thought, well, everyone just thought that I was just quite an anxious child. It's hard to kind of pull apart sort of when things got worse because I also have physical health problems and they came into play a lot as well, so it's quite difficult to kind of pinpoint what was my physical health problems, what was sort of mental health, what was autistic stuff. But basically when I was 15, my physical health got a lot worse. We now know that I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and there is quite a big correlation, I think, between people who have EDS and hypermobility. are more likely to be autistic. There's a lot of research and stuff out there about it. Again, we never knew about any of this. But yeah, when I was 15, my health got a lot worse. I ended up not being able to go to school for a long time, and I kind of thrived at home, I think. I mean, I missed my friends at school and I missed the routine, but I got on quite well with doing my work at home, and it wasn't too much of a problem for me, like having a home tutor and stuff. As well as my like physical health getting bad at that point, I was having a lot of problems with my mental health. Was that all because I was autistic and wasn't getting the support? I don't know. It's really difficult to tell. But yeah, I was diagnosed with depression. I was diagnosed with an eating disorder, and I went into hospital for quite a long time. And again, nothing was ever picked up autism-wise. It was all just blamed on mental health stuff, and at the time I didn't have the physical diagnosis either. It was very difficult to know really what was going on with me. I won't go into like my whole mental health history diagnosis. I've done other videos on that. But as I got older, I think we got to about 2012, which was when I ended up getting sectioned, and I was getting like little to no help with my physical health, which didn't help things at all. But a lot of my mental health problems were kind of expressing themselves as depression, anxiety, and eating disorder. I was hospitalised again. I did an eating disorders inpatient program thing. And I kept getting all these different diagnoses. Like I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, various other like personality issues that they were sort of picking up on. And every time I got diagnosed with something, it just didn't seem to fit. I never seemed to quite like fit the box that everyone else was fitting into. I was getting offered treatments and the treatments just weren't helping. And it was really frustrating, and I didn't understand why. It seemed to be helping other people, but nothing seemed to be helping me. Now I know that I possibly didn't have those diagnoses really. And that the whole like underlying thing was that I was autistic and I wasn't getting the support and understanding that I needed. I mean, you can also obviously have autism and have other comorbidities as well. But I think for me, a lot of the like underlying issue was the autism, and yeah, it just wasn't being recognised, and so that's why nothing was working for me. So we move along a bit further, and time just went on. I kept getting treatment for my mental health. I started getting like diagnosed with my physical health issues, and nothing was really happening. And then just like by chance, I happened to be referred back to my psychiatrist because I think it was my GP wanted to have my medication reviewed. And so I got referred back to my psychiatrist again, the same one that I had been seeing for years beforehand. And I just assumed it was just going to be this appointment where I'd go in, we'd look at my medication, decide what to do with it, and then that would be it. But I went in and talked to her a bit, and then she said, I think you might be autistic, and I'd like you to go and see like the specialist team to have an assessment. And I remember sitting there just thinking, I'm not autistic. Like, what are you saying? Like, I didn't believe her at all, and I thought, like, where are you coming from with this? Like, there's no way I'm autistic. Why would you be saying this? To give a bit of background, I used to work as a learning support assistant in a secondary school, and part of that was working with children and young people with various learning needs. Some of those also had autism, or were autistic, sorry. Majority of which I think were boys, now that I kind of think about it, which says a lot. But I just couldn't relate to the presentation of autism that I had been given as a learning support assistant. With me, I was just like, that doesn't add up at all. How can I be autistic? But my psychiatrist kind of went on and talked a little bit about how they're noticing or discovering that a lot of women or young women who were diagnosed with eating disorders, personality disorders, various things like that, they're now finding out that actually they probably are autistic, and that's why they haven't been responding to treatment. She also started telling me that basically they believe that autism can be quite different in women to that it is in boys, and that's why it hasn't been picked up, because most research has been done on boys, and women can present very differently to boys. She gave me this huge pile of paperwork which basically was like all these different ways that autism can present in girls, and how it's different to boys. And she was like, just take that away, like have a little read through it, see what you think, I'll do the referral, and then like we can go from there. So I remember coming out of that appointment just being like really, really dismissive of it, thinking like, she doesn't know where she's going. I remember her saying to me, I was wearing like a Disney top, and she said to me, oh, do you like Disney? And I was like, yeah, I love it. And she was like, yeah, that's really telling. Like, people, like autistic people often have like special interests, and Disney seems to be quite a common one among women. And I was like, no, I love Disney. Like, it's nothing about it. It's, you know, I like Disney like everyone else does. And I remember just coming out of that appointment thinking like, she is so far off the mark. Like, I don't know what the point of that appointment was. So I came home with my paperwork, and I think for a while I just didn't even look at it. I was just like, I didn't even want to entertain the idea. It just didn't make sense to me. But then I started having like a read through all this paperwork and about the way autism presents in women and why it's been missed in women so much, all these different things. And the more I read, the more I started thinking, okay, maybe this kind of describes me quite well. And the more I read, the more I thought, okay, maybe she's not quite so off the mark as I thought she was. And this is basically me on paper. This is possibly why I have struggled so much for most of my life and not been able to get the help that I need. And I think the more I read it and the more it sunk in and the more I researched, like, because I then started doing my own research, the more I thought, actually, do you know what, I think maybe I am autistic. And I think I started to just change my mind about how I felt about being autistic. To begin with, I was very defensive. I didn't want to be labelled like that. I don't know why. It's not that I didn't feel badly towards autistic people or anything like that. I just didn't want the label for myself, I suppose. And yeah, the longer that I researched it and the longer that I sort of read up on it and everything, the more it just made sense to me, and the more I think I started to accept the possibility that I could be autistic. So by the time that I got round to having my assessment, I waited like over 2 years to have an assessment, and then it was done by Zoom because of COVID and everything. I was sent loads of like forms that I had to fill out. My parents had to fill stuff out, answer questions about my childhood and growing up, and like it was really thorough. It took a long time to fill everything in, and I found it quite hard, I think, filling a lot of that stuff in, and just like I think my parents possibly found it, my mum certainly possibly found it a bit hard too, thinking like, how did we miss all this? Why wasn't it noticed? I don't know whether they felt a bit guilty. I've never really spoken to them about it, to be honest, but I don't blame them for not noticing. I think it was just, that's what the times were like, and the way that I was presenting wasn't what was typically autistic, that had, you know, the research suggested that this is what autism looks like, when in reality we know that that's not true anymore. So yeah, we filled in all these like forms and questionnaires and everything, and then I had a really long appointment with this lady who asked so many questions. I had to have it with my mum. They wanted me to have it with somebody who kind of knew me very well, and my mum seemed like a good person to go for. So yeah, we had this appointment and talked a lot, and then I think we had 2 actually, because it was so long they ended up splitting it into 2. And then basically she said, right, we'll make another appointment for like a few weeks' time so that she could go away and kind of collate everything together and talk to the team and decide what they thought. And then, yeah, we would come back and have this next appointment. So we had this next appointment, and basically we started the appointment, and she said, well, I'm trying to think how she put it. It was like, oh, basically, yeah, I'd like to tell you that I think you are autistic. Congratulations, or something like that. And I think it was a really nice way of doing it, because I've often seen people be told like they're autistic, and you know, people are very like, oh, I'm so sorry, or whatever, and it's like, it's not a terrible thing. So it was quite nice, like the positive way that they put it. It didn't make me feel like I'd been like burdened with this new horrible thing. And yeah, basically she told me that I was autistic, asked me how I felt about it, and at that point I think I was quite accepting of it. I'd done so much research myself that I'd pretty much already worked it out that I was autistic. And yeah, that was basically it. There was no more sort of like, there was nothing else. I kind of felt a bit sort of flat afterwards. It just felt like a little bit of like an anticlimax almost. It was like we'd been going through all these appointments and everything. I'd been diagnosed autistic, and then that was it. And I was like, oh, well, what do I do now? I didn't really know what to expect. I wasn't sure if they were going to be able to offer any support. There are groups and stuff that she kind of said were available. It's not something that I've particularly looked into at the moment, because I just didn't feel like I needed it. But yeah, I felt to begin with just a little bit sort of like it was an anticlimax. I was just like, I just felt like, well, now what happens? Like, I'm autistic, that's great, but where do I go from here? And for quite a while I just felt like that and didn't really know what to do. So it's not been that long since I was diagnosed. I think it was it last year or the year before? I can't even remember. But I think as time has gone on, I've kind of become more comfortable with the diagnosis, and I'm happier now to be open about it. To begin with, I felt a little bit nervous. I don't know why. I guess I was just worried what people would say or think. Now I don't really care. It's been a weird old journey, and I guess it's still ongoing, because learning that you're autistic and that you have been autistic your whole life is quite a big thing to get your head around, and to try and understand your whole life with the frame of being autistic rather than not. It takes quite a lot of getting your head around, and I'm still getting my head around. I'm still learning about me and what being autistic means to me, and I think that learning will probably go on for quite a long time. Overall, I felt like it's a bit of a weight off my shoulders, because it just explains so much. It explains my struggles with mental health and why I never seemed to get any better when I was getting treatment, because for a long time I was like being told that I wasn't trying hard enough, or I wasn't practicing things enough, or that, you know, I wasn't like fitting in this box properly, and all these kind of things. Whereas now I know that it's like, it wasn't my fault, it was the fault of the treatments and stuff that were wrong for me. And that's kind of made me feel a bit better, I think, just knowing that like it wasn't my fault, I wasn't doing anything wrong. But yeah, just like I since getting the diagnosis, I keep looking back at like different events and things that have happened in my life, and like reframing them with me being autistic, and it just makes so much sense. I think that's like the biggest thing that's happened, is just that stuff makes sense. And sometimes I have felt really sad that I didn't get diagnosed early enough, and that I have to struggle through so much stuff. I feel angry sometimes that it wasn't picked up, and that, you know, I was made to feel like things were my fault, or that I wasn't trying hard enough, or whatever. Sometimes I do sit and wonder, like, if I'd been diagnosed as a child, would I have ended up in hospital? Would I have ended up being sectioned? All these kind of things. But I kind of think there's not much point in wondering, like, what if, because what happened. There's nothing I can do to change it. All I can do is kind of change how I live my life now. But yeah, I do look back at, like, little Jenny and, like, think, oh, I just wish I could go and, like, explain to her why she's finding these things hard, why she feels so anxious, why she keeps, like, hiding herself away from big situations. And, like, yeah, sometimes I do just feel quite sad for, like, my younger self. But apart from that, I'm just starting to try and learn what being autistic means to me, trying to understand my thoughts and my feelings in the context of being autistic, and why I feel certain, you know, like, why I feel certain ways, why some things feel overwhelming, why I guess sometimes feelings and thoughts before I would have put down to that's just depression, that's just anxiety, whereas now I'm kind of like, well, actually I don't know if that is, I think it's because I'm autistic and I'm getting too overwhelmed, or you know, I'm getting, like, sensory overload and things. So it's trying to deal with things differently than I did before, which is quite helpful because I'm learning a lot more about myself, what I need to do for myself to kind of manage my energy levels and emotions and stuff. I can tell when I'm becoming overloaded because I stop talking and I get really overwhelmed, and what kind of outwardly looks like depressed or anxious, when actually I just know that I need to take myself away for a bit and just, like, calm down and de-stress. So it's definitely helpful. There's still so much to learn. I'm trying to sort of, like, I've joined some groups to try and understand autism in women more from kind of other people who've maybe been on this journey a bit longer. I'm still learning, like, the right vocabulary to use around autism and what people prefer to say. Obviously I know it's a very individual thing, but I want to understand, like, what the community as a whole is saying, and, you know, help to campaign and raise awareness for better understanding of, like, especially women with autism, but, you know, with everyone that's autistic, it's important that we're understood and that we have a voice, and I'm just, yeah, trying to navigate that. So I feel like this video has been just a little bit of a ramble of me kind of trying to get my thoughts together a bit, and that's kind of how I feel at the moment. I'm still just trying to learn and understand and get used to this new but not new diagnosis, if that makes any sense. Obviously I have been autistic since I was born, but it still feels quite new still, so it's very strange kind of trying to get your head around that and to work out who am I, what am I doing in life. So yeah, I'm sorry if this has been a bit rambly. As I say, it is just me trying to kind of talk about what it's like to be autistic and to only be diagnosed as an adult. I think it's we're going to have very different experiences being diagnosed as an adult to someone who was diagnosed as a child. So I think it's important that we talk about both situations. Yeah, I'm kind of finding my feet, I think, in the autism community, learning about, you know, research and awareness raising and interventions that can be helpful, interventions that aren't helpful, all sorts of things. So I hope it's been okay listening to me kind of ramble on a little bit, and I hope that if anyone is going through the kind of diagnostic procedure at the moment, or thinks they might be autistic and doesn't really know what to do, or has been diagnosed autistic for a long time, I hope maybe that it's just helpful to hear my ramblings about it and, yeah, how I kind of feel at the moment. Let me know if you have found it interesting or helpful, or if there's anything else you'd like to talk about in the comments to do with autism or being autistic. I'd really love to chat to some people so that we can just talk about it and make sense of it and everything. Yeah, so do leave me a comment and let me know what you think. I hope you've enjoyed the video and that you found it helpful. Do leave me a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, so that you can see more videos from me, of me rambling on about goodness knows what. And I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!